Hey there, lovely folks! Ready to have a blast? After a long week, I'm delighted to bring you an array of mesmerizing tales today. Welcome to our latest compilation. If you happen to miss any of our previous videos, or simply wish to relive the magic, worry not. Just hit that like button and subscribe to our channel to unlock more fantastic stories like the ones you're about to witness. Be sure to keep track of the timestamps for your favorite stories and drop them in the comments below. We adore hearing from you, our cherished viewers, and truly value your feedback. So now's the time to sit back, unwind, and immerse yourself in this spectacular show. Let's make this experience an unforgettable one together. Since we've heard from the ER, lawyers, what's the stupidest reason you've been asked to sue for? What was the outcome? Story 1. I could go on all day, but I'll limit it to the two most egregious. I'm a retired public defender. Before I started with the PD's office, I worked briefly for a private firm where I encountered these two cases. 1A. Single-parent mom had to fly to an out-of-town training for her job. Deadbeat dad wasn't paying child support because he claimed he couldn't find a job. This will be important later. Mom left her 4-year-old daughter with her sister, the child's aunt. While mom's away, the aunt takes the girl to Chuck E. Cheese. A repairman at Chuck E. Cheese opens an access panel to repair the pulley that operates the giant puppets. Repairman goes in back to get a tool and leaves the access panel open. The girl puts her hand in the opening and her fingers are severed. She's rushed to the ER, and the docs want a parent. With mom out of town, deadbeat dad is called in. After consulting with the docs and with the girl in the OR, deadbeat dad calls the law firm from the waiting room and wants to know if he has a case. He wants to include lost wages as part of his damages. I left for a public defender soon after that, and I don't know how this case ever resolved. 2A. A 28-year-old man marries a 16-year-old girl, much to the dismay of her parents. In this state, a 16-year-old can marry without parental consent if she's pregnant, which she was. He proves to be a chronically unemployed and abusive husband. The mother-in-law convinces the girl to take the baby and come home. With her gone, the husband of the year goes out and finds a high school girl. The wife changes her mind and returns to her husband with the baby. Months later, the husband is served in a paternity suit from the high school girl he was with during the wife's absence. He makes an appointment with me and wants to know if I can force the mother-in-law to pay the child support to the high school girl, since it was the mother-in-law's fault that the wife wasn't there for him to get intimate with, thereby forcing him to seek out a high school girl. We did not take the case. I would just quietly say, "You are a terrible human being. I hope you live for eternity so that you may learn to regret your actions. Now get out of my office." Story 2. I turn down at least 2 meritless cases every day. I'm convinced that the media, friend of a friend stories, and people that can't differentiate between getting nasty grams and getting sued blow the number of frivolous lawsuits that actually go to court out of proportion. It takes one stupid case among 50 states and 300+ million people to make headlines every few months for Americans to think lawsuits are out of control. Moreover, journalists and lay people know far less about the law than they think. It leads to many ostensibly frivolous cases being misportrayed in the media. See, for example, Liebeck versus McDonald's. Almost all attorneys that pursue tort claims work on contingency and front all costs, way more than you think after depositions and expert witnesses, mal cases, and they can run 6 figures. You lose a surprising amount of money by signing stupid cases. That said, the dumbest call I've gotten is tied between, number 1, a mental patient calling because he didn't satisfy his girlfriend. I told him that'd be his girlfriend's claim. And number 2, a redneck calling because he wanted his old teeth back that a dentist extracted. Slip and fall cases have the worst reputation, but are almost always awful. It's a rare day, and a magical set of facts when I sign those up. In order to win, one typically needs a business to have, number 1, some sort of defect on their property. 2, the business needs to have known about the defect and neglected to correct it, or the defect was there so long they should have known, for example, with reasonable property inspections. And 3, the defect isn't open and obvious. If you have all of those and someone injures themselves, I think a suit is reasonable. If you're profiting by inviting people on your property, you have a duty to not keep your property in negligent disrepair. And at least in my jurisdiction, jury verdicts and settlements are much less than the media makes you think. Wage loss, medical bills, and other economic expenses they incurred, and pain and suffering, not that much. Jobless people that sue don't make that much money because they have no wage loss. Those famous astronomical verdicts result from punitive damages, which only occur when the business was being particularly egregious. Scandals, cover-ups, etc. See the McDonald's case again. Story 3. Lady calls 911 and says the dump truck in front of her is spilling gravel all over the road and her truck. I ask her if any damage is done to her vehicle, and she says she doesn't know. Officers find the dump truck, follow it about a mile, and don't observe any gravel spilling out. They pull it over anyway to get driver, company, insurance information, assuming she wants to make a damage to property report. I ask the lady to stop with the officers or bring her vehicle to the police department so they can see the damage and to the report for her insurance company. She tells me she doesn't have time because her daughter is late for a singing lesson. 2 weeks later, after a hailstorm, she comes to the police department to make a report for damage, but she's driving another vehicle. She claims her truck is already at the repair shop and the estimate is $3,000. Officer tells her he can't make a report for damage without seeing the vehicle, but he goes ahead and makes an information-only report to appease her. Now she's trying to sue the police department because the officer won't testify that the dump truck is the cause of the damage. Story 4. Not a lawyer, but I did get sued once for child support. My deadbeat dad, ex-husband, called after 5 years of no contact and no financial support. He's dying. Kids see him. The younger one wants to stay with him for a while. She stays with him and his new wife and daughter. They live in the same town. He miraculously gets better. 4 months in, I got a letter from his lawyer for child support. Says I'm a deadbeat mom. He's had her for years without any support from me. I walked into the remediation meeting with school and medical records, divorce, support papers, history of his non-payment through the state, and of course, proof of his other daughter who still lived with me. Apparently, he forgot to tell his lawyers a few things. Younger daughter was dumped back on my doorstep the next day, and I never heard from his lawyer again. That was over 20 years ago, and he's still alive. Story 5. My boss was holding a fundraiser for our city's art museum. He and his family over the years have given this museum cash and art gifts worth approximately $40 million. During the fundraiser, one of the employees trips on a stone walkway and sues my boss for $2 million. What the employee failed to understand is that because of his multi-million-dollar art collection, the boss has security cameras covering every inch of his property. They showed that the fall was staged, and the plaintiff had to pay my boss legal fees. The museum refused to fire the employee because she was banging the director, and for that, they will never get another donation from his family again. This family's art collection travels to museums around the globe and is currently valued in the low to mid 9 figures. Story 6. My uncle used to own a sawmill in southern Massachusetts. Some lady came by and came into his property even though the gate was closed, and he didn't come out when she rang the bell. She then slipped in water and fell, breaking her arm. She then sued him for damages and won an almost $1 million case against him. It's complete insanity, and my uncle had to pay with almost his entire life savings. He's a veteran suffering with PTSD, now in financial ruin, still dealing with payments almost 10 years later. He had to sell his sawmill and now lives in a trailer in New Hampshire. If this is true, the jury had to find a reason to assign punitive damages. I doubt a broken arm could be worth $1 million in actual damages. Story 7. My sister was sued by this elderly woman. It was her senior year of high school toward the end of the year. She's leaving school and takes a right onto the road. Her and the elderly woman got into a car accident, and the police officer found my sister at fault. Within a year later, my parents learned that the old lady is suing them for doctor appointments and such. When it comes to the case, we find that the elderly woman had been taking prescription pills that affect motor skills. Worst case, the pills were in the daughter's name, not hers. Not only that, but the old lady had been speeding in a 35-mile-per-hour school zone. She actually admitted to it. Parents didn't have to pay a dime to the old board. Story 8. I'm on the defense side of the house, but I saw a township get sued because 3 of the township supervisors had lunch together and didn't invite the plaintiff. He claimed that it was in violation of sunshine and government laws. He had no evidence of any wrongdoing and filed on his own behalf because no actual lawyer would take his case. I read his complaint, part of it, It was 128 pages long and quoted, among other things, the Declaration of Independence and Patrick Henry at length. The judge tossed it out and entered an order prohibiting him from suing the township again unless he had an actual lawyer or the court's permission. Story 9. I saw one here a while ago from some guy whose dad is a doctor. He performed some form of shoulder surgery on a woman, letting her maintain use of her arm. A few years later, she decided to sue him because she got throat cancer and the surgery enabled her to continue smoking. What the frick, America? Why are you guys so obsessed with suing? If I was the judge, I would have agreed that the surgeon was at fault and demanded that he amputate the arm as compensation. Not optional amputation, compulsory amputation. Story 10. My fire tech teacher has a great story he told me of. He worked with the fire department, and they're called to a car accident. The first car is smashed in, and they get the jaws of life. Open it up, one man survived, and his 9-month pregnant wife was decapitated. Another firefighter proceeded to do an emergency C-section and save the man's baby. Well, after finding out he was out of scope for doing so, the man sued the firefighter. He sued him for saving his only child. What was the most the heck moment with your siblings? Story 1. When I was young, about 13, my family was leaving my grandparents' house after a weekend visit. It was a long drive home, about 4 hours. I had to pee really bad, and my parents hated stopping. So I discreetly grabbed my empty Mountain Dew bottle and emptied my bladder into it. It wasn't hard to hide, being in the back seat of an SUV. Well, I put it under the seat after I was finished, and when I got home, I totally forgot about it. My parents cleaned out the car later, and my thought was that they threw it away. Nope, they placed it in the fridge, thinking it was a half-full bottle of pop. Well, I only figured this out because my sister took a drink out of it and screamed. She said it must have been old and been in there for forever because it tasted horrible. I was horrified, but I took it from her, fake smelled it, and threw it away, saying, "Ugh, yeah, that's disgusting." I've never told her, or anyone for that matter, what really happened. Story 2. I tell this story anytime I get a chance to embarrass my brother. I was about 9, making him about 6. Thanksgiving dinner at our grandparents' house, we were both in the kitchen together, just the two of us, each with a slice of pumpkin pie. My little brother grabs the salt shaker from the table, slowly unscrews the cap, dumps the entire shaker of salt on his pie, and eats the whole thing, making eye contact with me the whole time. He had this look like he knew what he was doing, so I didn't question it. 20 minutes later, he's chasing a cousin through the hall. He dead stops, says, "Uh-oh," and projectile vomits all over the walls and floor. He's descended upon by adults asking him what the matter is. His response, "Too much salt." I was the only one who knew what he meant. Why, though? Story 3. I had just finished riding my bike home from a friend's place to see my mom pull into the driveway. Out of the other side of the car, my sister's head popped out. She'd been off to college, and I didn't expect to see her. My first thought, which I openly said because I was a little crap, was, "Why is Sis home? She get knocked up in college?" Out steps my very pregnant sister. It was a rare double what the heck moment, as I was surprised to see her that pregnant, and both my sister and mom were shocked at my accurate joke guess, and inappropriate guess, to be fair. Sort of similar thing happened to me. I texted my cousin on her 20th birthday, "Congratulations, you avoided teenage pregnancy." Turns out she had just found out she'd gotten knocked up and hadn't told anybody yet. Story 4. It was pretty awkward when he knocked on my bedroom door to give me condoms when my boyfriend was over, but also very nice of him to be worried about me like that. The what the heck moment comes from his girlfriend later that day sharing with me, "I know you probably don't want to know this, but your brother's willy is huge." I super did not want to know that. Screw you, Shannon. My poor brother shares your pain. He had a party at our place when I was 18, and me and my then boyfriend were there, and then boyfriend gets really drunk, walks up to my brother and says, "Hey, I'm probably gonna sleep with your sister tonight." He then went upstairs and passed out in bed, alone. My brother still makes fun of me and cringes at this to this day. Story 5. I was out on a car ride with my dad, and we arrived back at the house at like 3 a.m. My front door opens straight into my kitchen, and I throw open the door, expecting an empty kitchen, only to see my brother buck naked standing in front of the sink. I screamed, "Why the heck are you naked?" He scrambled back to the shower. Apparently he was mid-shower, his back hurt, so he went to the kitchen to start heating water for a hot water bottle for his back, and just stopped to have a snack or something while waiting for the water to boil, all while leaving the shower running. My dad still laughs about it. What else are you supposed to do when you get hungry? You get naked and eat. Story 6. My friend decided to spend Christmas in Mexico at an all-inclusive resort after I had moved across the country for work. My siblings and I were sharing a room. One night, my brother gets in late from drinking. I wake up and see him standing over my luggage. I say, "What the heck are you doing?" He says, "Taking a freaking pee." He was. I was furious. He never did really apologize. One time we were staying at a resort type thing, and my dad came home drunk late at night. I woke up and there was an entire slice of pizza in my shoe. Story 7. Came downstairs from being asleep. Living room is in disarray. Blood drops are on the floor, and I see little flecks here and there on the wall. I say to my girlfriend, "What the heck happened?" Concerned someone got injured or something. "Your brothers had a scissor fight," she tells me. A scissor fight? Yes, those two freaking brain surgeons took up craft scissors and went at each other in my living room while my, no doubt, horrified girlfriend watched on in shock and awe. They were gone by the time I woke up, thank Christ, but the evidence was hard to miss. Story 8. I was sitting in front of the television one day when my sister walked behind me. She threw a little bouncy ball at me, but it bounced off my head, hit the television, bounced back off my head, and back at her. She was so surprised that it was such a perfect shot that she decided to try it again to repeat it. I was so happy that my sister was playing with me that I sit there as she threw this ball at my head, trying to repeat the shot for like half an hour. Dude, that's so depressing.
Also, it's probably a fake story because, as we all know, in the realm of elastic collisions, governed by the principles of classical mechanics and conservation laws, we encounter a peculiar phenomenon when attempting to envision the trajectory of a bouncy ball in the scenario you have proposed. When the bouncy ball impacts an object, such as a person's head, it undergoes a collision where both momentum and kinetic energy are transferred. In this collision, the ball's kinetic energy is partially dissipated as heat and sound, leading to a decrease in its rebounding capabilities. Consequently, the ball's velocity and kinetic energy decrease significantly after hitting the head. Now, as the bouncy ball encounters the TV, which acts as a secondary collision point, additional energy dissipation occurs due to the deformable nature of the TV's surface. The impact causes a further loss of kinetic energy, resulting in a reduction in the ball's speed and potential rebounding ability. In order for the ball to re-engage with the head, a number of improbable conditions must align. Firstly, the ball's initial velocity after the TV collision should be precisely aligned with the trajectory towards the head. However, given the inherent chaotic nature of the ball's rebounding patterns, accurately predicting such alignment becomes exceedingly difficult. Secondly, the energy loss experienced during the previous collisions makes it improbable for the ball to regain its original speed and trajectory, making a successful rebound off the TV to hit the head again highly unlikely. Considering the principles of energy conservation and the dissipative nature of real-world collisions, we must conclude that the scenario you propose, involving the ball bouncing off of a person's head, hitting a TV, and then returning to hit the head again, lies within the realm of improbability and violates the basic laws of physics as we currently understand them. In summary, the loss of energy and the unpredictable nature of collisions hinder the possibility of the bouncy ball following such a trajectory, making the proposed sequence highly improbable in the realm of classical mechanics.
Story 9. My favorite story is that I once went outside at 1 a.m. to watch a meteor shower, and my brother's bedroom window faced the backyard. I don't know why he was up, he was maybe 12 at the time, and I hear him open the window and shout, "Who's out there?" I reply, "Just me." And he says, "Oh, I'll be right out." My brother gets out of bed at 1 in the morning, puts on some shoes, and comes outside and says, "So, what are we doing?" The kid was forever down for late-night adventures, apparently. Story 10. Probably when I was 9 and my older brother was 13, We were home watching TV one day during the summer. He was flipping through channels and stopped on an episode of Donahue that featured a male stripper right in the middle of his routine, with an audience of middle-aged women cheering. He put the remote down and excitedly said, "We are watching this." He's now married with 2 kids and is aspiring to be a Baptist minister. He gay. So gay. Story 11. Told my sister to come inside for dinner. She was hitting balls down our driveway with a field hockey stick. She immediately turned and swung full force into my face, breaking my nose and deviating my septum. That was 20 years ago, and she won't talk to me because I've wronged her in the past. Which I can't breathe out my right nostril. I've had a deviated septum repair that reverted. You're not alone. At least it makes my wife smile when she can hear my nose whistle. Story 12. Watching TV with my older sister, she gets up, walks over to the house phone, and picks it up. "Hello," she said. "Yes, he is. One moment." She covers the microphone. "It's for you, Bintek." Crazy, I didn't hear it ring. I think to myself. I walk to the phone. My sister begins savagely beating me with the corded phone, for no reason. She concocted a ruse just to beat me with a phone. Story 13. When I was about 4, my parents told my brother, age 13, to take my sister and I for a walk for an hour. I think my parents wanted some private time. He took us for a walk all right. We were gone for 12 hours. My parents were frantic, and the police were looking for us. God knows what he was thinking, but he's always been a bit of an idiot. Teachers, they say there are no stupid questions, but what's the most stupid question a student has ever asked you? Story 1. More of a statement that prompted a whole discussion when I was student teaching. To set the stage, I would like to point out that I am white and my leading teacher was African American, and the classroom was about 60% African American, 30% Latino, and the remaining 10% a mixture of Asian and white. This was also my advanced class, and we were discussing the apartheid in Africa. Me. So the black Africans and white Africans, student raises hand. Miss Ducky, you can't say that. Say what? Black. It's African American. Me, trying my hardest to not die a little inside. No, that's actually not the correct phrase. Can anyone tell me why African American is not the correct term for this situation? Silence. Okay, guys, look at it this way. Are we talking about Americans? No, we're not. We're talking about a racial issue in Africa with no relation to America at all. The definition of African American is a person of African descent living in America. So if the people we're talking about are not American, they cannot be African American, can they? So to talk about the racial issue, the labels used are black Africans and white Africans, as outlined by our textbook. Student: no, you can't say that. They're African Americans. At this point, my lead teacher is face-palming. She's in total disbelief. And as much as she loved to watch me struggle, she stepped in and tried to explain it as well. 20 minutes go by of the two of us trying our best. The bell rings. The kids still couldn't figure it out. I think we both nearly cried. Story 2. This freaking kid, I'm sure everyone has one in their grade. The type that is told his answer is wrong, but somehow won't accept it and defends his factually wrong answer with the weirdest BS logic. It was the year that the game Fable came out, and the slogan was, "For every decision, a million outcomes." This kid was in my 9th grade English class, and we were learning about actual fables. This kid asks the teacher, "Doesn't the word fable mean for a single decision there's a million outcomes?" Cue everyone in the class slowly turning their heads to look at him. The teacher said, "No, a fable is a short story or tale used to establish or show ethics and morals. Something along those lines, aka the actual meaning of the word fable." The kid goes, "Oh, well, I think you're wrong, because there's this game that came out, and in the commercials, it says for every decision there's a million outcomes." The teacher and this kid literally argued about the meaning of the word fable for like half an hour in class, and everyone's telling the kid he's wrong, and he refuses to accept it, because the commercial said otherwise. He didn't actually use the word otherwise. I'm sure that it's out of his vocabulary range, but he refused to relent. Freaking Ryan, shut the frick up. History teacher said Magna Carta, and this one girl opens her mouth and says, Excuse me, it's manga. I hope she thinks back on that and cringes a little. Story 3. I'm a federal budget analyst and had to train a new employee who had apparently been working in budgets for 20 years or so should have been able to quickly pick things up. She wasn't. When I finally got her on the right track with our year-end financial reports, I told her she was close, but her numbers were off, so double-check them. She responded with, "Well, wouldn't someone else just fix that?" No, that's exactly what you get paid to do. So you need to put the correct numbers in the report so we can publish it. What on earth would we do with almost correct financial reports? The next day, she just couldn't figure it out, and I said, "You're really close. It's probably just rounding." She said, "It doesn't matter. How do you know when you should round up or down?" I said, "Yes, it matters. Just use normal rounding rules." She asked what those are. I very slowly said, 0.5 or higher, you round up. She had never been familiarized with that, apparently. In the end, I really felt like I would have been better off teaching a third grader. Story 4. When I was in high school, in health class, while going over reproduction, there was a fellow student who raised her hand and said, "If you were sterile, could you pass it on to your children?" The whole class giggled, and she, confused, said she was serious. She wanted to know, if you're sterile, could you pass it on to your kids? The teacher, with a smile, said to her, "Okay, let's think about this. What does it mean to be sterile?" She began answering, "It means that you can't have Oh! Followed by another round of laughter from the rest of the class. To her credit, they're finding that people conceived using IVF are having difficulty having children of their own as adults. So, not completely a dumb question, depending if you mean completely sterile or unable to reproduce unassisted. Story 5. Taught English and literature in a juvenile justice long-term treatment facility. I have many great stories. Me. This is a map of the United States. Here is the Midwest. It's where your math teacher is from. Student. Oh, snap, we're in a war with them. Me. Are you thinking about the Middle East? Oh, yeah. Is that a different place? Also, playing a trivia game with students. Johann Gutenberg invented what? Student. Shoots his hand up in the air quickly before I even finish the question, and very sure of his answer. Cheese. Another one. Student reading the Three Little Pigs out loud. And the big bad wolf huffed, and he puffed, and he passed it around. Me. I've never heard of that version of the story before, Mr. Student. Student. Yeah, you wouldn't. It's the hood version. Story 6. I'm a corporate trainer, so hopefully this counts. I used to train content for an exam that everyone in our field must take to get licensed. If you didn't pass, you had to go back through the course. Well, I had a dude go through my class 4 times. 4. Here's the conversation we had before his 3rd exam. What attempt am I on? Wait, what? Well, I've taken the test twice, but everyone else in here hasn't taken it, so am I taking my test for the 1st time or the 3rd time? What do you think? I don't know, that's why I'm asking you. Dude thought that he might be on his 1st attempt because he was back in a class with a bunch of people who were on theirs. Story 7. As part of teaching U.S. government, I ran a zombie apocalypse scenario where the students had to respond to an ongoing crisis in real time using the actual powers of the government as different parts of the government. It was my favorite activity all semester, and I went all in, including with a large map of the U.S. that would be updated for every day that passed. As part of this activity, I prepared a handout of a fake news story about the zombie apocalypse beginning in our hometown. It had pictures of zombies shambling around and was written all newspaper style. One day, after handing these out, an 18-year-old student raised her hand and said, "Mr. Crowsage, did this really happen?" Story 8. I used to volunteer teaching at an after-school program for 14-year-olds. We were doing a project that involved balloons. One boy had blown his balloon but couldn't get it tied. I tied it and gave it back to him. He immediately tossed it up. As it sank to the floor, his face fell. Obviously disappointed, he asked, "Aw, so they're not helium?" He really was a sweet kid, but he definitely had his fair share of these kinds of moments. That's actually sad in the sweet, "oh, you idiot" kind of way. Like he thought helium was a type of balloon and not a gas. on Free Balloon Day. Story 9. Grade 5, anatomy education. I had a rule that any question can be asked, but I might ask you to ask your parents instead of me. I heard a story about a man who put his stuff into muffins and fed it to grade 1 kids. Well, that's pretty disgusting, and I would think that person would go to jail for doing that. Wouldn't the girls get pregnant from eating it? And before I could say anything, another student blurted out, "No, they wouldn't get pregnant. They haven't gone through puberty yet." I'm thankful for days when kids remind me that they are still kids. Story 10. I was a math teacher. One day, a student, apropos of nothing, right at the start of the class, looked me dead in the eyes and asked me, "How did Jesus nail his other hand to the cross?" He then began miming the impossible task, musing over whether he had a hammer on a rope in his mouth and swung his head side to side to insert the final nail. He didn't," I replied. "Oh," said the student with a long pause. "That makes sense." This is the story of my one stupid question. Story 11. This came up all the time when teaching kids how to do their taxes. I must have had this conversation a dozen times. "Sir, I don't know what to do at this part." "Well, what does the instructions say on that line?" "Add box 23 and 24 and write the answer here." "So add box 23 and 24. I, to this day, have no idea how you teach someone to follow very explicit instructions. Wow, they didn't teach taxes to me in school. Story 12. In my senior year of high school, I was in a personal finance class. The teacher explained that not paying your taxes could get you incarcerated. Student. So if you don't pay your taxes, the government will light you on fire? No, incarcerated means to imprison. You're thinking of incinerated. Oh, wait, then what's taxidermy? Taxidermy is a bonus skin treatment you get from the IRS if you do your taxes just right. Employees, hiring managers, HR people. Has anyone ever given you a reference that ended up costing them the job? If so, what happened? Story 1. HR person here. In a past job, I did a lot of checking references. Called a reference for someone who was starting in a week or so. First employer is a small company. Person who answers the phone tells me they want me to talk to the owner when I say the former employee's name. Owner comes on and is super friendly. I tell her the former employee and that I just need a quick reference. She tells me, "I wish good things for all the people who've ever worked for me. I do not wish good things for her." Of course, I ask why, and she tells me a whole list of issues, including her walking out in the middle of conversations to go smoke, never showing up to work on time, and on the days she did show up on time, she would ask to leave early. She goes on for about 5 minutes on all the reasons she was fired from the job. At some point, it's too much, and I stop taking notes. At this point in my career, I've never gotten more than a generic, "Yes, they worked here for X amount of dollars an hour," and that's all I can say. So I ask my manager how to handle this. She tells me, try calling 2 more of the references and see what they say. Call a lawyer's office who had hired her as a temp contract employee for 3 months. They told me they asked her to leave 1.5 months in because the head lawyer said he couldn't deal with her anymore. She couldn't even finish out the contract. Same basic issues as the first reference. Call the final one. It was a franchise of a chain, and the franchise had closed, so dead end. Call corporate, and they can't verify because it was a franchise location. My manager calls the candidate and tells her that she needs to give us something else to go off of for reference, since we've gotten not so good ones so far. She cannot give us anything, and the ones we had were awful, so we decided not to hire. I've been involved in the hiring of hundreds of employees, and this was the only time I've ever had someone give an honest reference, and I was so glad we sidestepped that minefield. Story 2. I'm not an HR person, but a reference has cost me getting a job once, almost cost me a second time. I'm a teacher in the UK and 3 or 4 years into my career. I had applied for a promotion to head of department in a different school. My current school tried to convince me to stay, but they couldn't offer me the promotion, so I went for it. I thought I aced the interview and got down to the final 2, but I was passed over for someone else. The deputy head at the potential new school told me that he would have usually given his right leg for a teacher like me, but that I should get my current head to write me a better reference next time. I chalked it up to experience. But less than 12 months later, the same position in my current school opened up, and I was given that job. As part of the handover of paperwork from the current head of department, I found the reference I had been given. It was shocking. It literally said that I couldn't do the job. I couldn't do the job that they had just given me. I did that job, I thought very well, for the next 6 or 7 years. But things changed, so I applied for a sideways move to a different school. Again, my current school wanted me to stay and tried to tempt me with all sorts of stuff. But I stood firm and went for the interview. This time, the head at the new school, who I will always thank for this, brought up my reference in the interview and said that he was confused because my reference was so poor. But what he'd seen had been much better. Literally everything that was in there, I was able to put the other side to. I got the job. My old head was obviously writing bad references for those teachers he wanted to keep. I hear he also wrote glowing references for those he wanted to get rid of as well. Story 3. It didn't cost him the job, though he still did not get it, but it was kind of a weird story. It happened this past summer. I was hiring for a warehouse worker position and was responsible for checking references. We had this one guy, had a 3-year gap in employment. Normally this isn't really a big deal as long as you have a good excuse. School, sick, taking care of someone is usually the valid ones. He said he took a sabbatical to deal with the untimely death of his parents. So we called one reference. It was his former boss at a gas station he worked at in Utah. Guy answers the phone and tells me that he's been missing for 3 years after he and his parents got into a car crash and the parents died. According to the police, he left the scene, was not driving from what they could tell, and walked into the forest. So I called the guy back in, having notified the police who were sending people down to talk to him. I talked to him for a good while about the incident. He went into shock and left. By the time he realized what had really happened, he was on the run for like a week and didn't think he should go back. Dude spent 3 years living off of stolen food, money, under-the-table jobs, and living in a tent and cars. Finally moved out here thinking he could apply for a job without anyone asking questions. He used an old resume he had on a Google Drive and didn't realize it had the reference. He went back, I think served some time for running away, but was forgiven, and last I checked up on him on Facebook, I stalk from time to time, he's back in Utah working at a landscaping company. Story 4. I used to work in a nursing home. We briefly employed a young girl, about 18 years old, who was useless. She would wander around the place with no shoes on. She would shower one resident in the time it took other carers to shower 5. When an old lady fell over in front of her, happens all the time, old ladies are not known for their ability to remain upright, she actually ran away screaming with her hands in the air, leaving the old lady on the floor. Then she went and had an extended cigarette break to calm her nerves. She did not pass her probation. For some reason, another staff member who had the same position as this girl, was not her supervisor in any way, gave this girl a glowing reference that got her a job at a different nursing home. She did about as well there as she did with us. Not long after, the lady who gave the reference applied at the other home. They actually laughed at her and told her there was no way they were giving her a job after she sent them that girl. Story 5. Working as a recruiter, I've had some great ones. Reference said to me, "Are you serious? She gave my name?" Then proceeded to say she was the worst consultant she ever had. Then followed up via email with the testimony of someone else in her team on how awful this person was. We had a guy put my colleague on an application for a government job saying that he was his boss at X department. He most certainly was not. I had a guy with overseas references, so I sent each of them our template to fill out since we only had a few hours per day to connect during business hours. Each reference comes back virtually identical. I call up the buddy and read it back to him, and he insists it's a coincidence. Same spelling mistakes, and in most cases, the same word-for-word remarks. This comes up more often and in more ways than you'd think. People are not intelligent. Holy crap, you really have to be dedicated to not only give a terrible reference, but to actively seek out testimony from a second source and provide that as well. Story 6. I thought I was going to be the reference that cost someone a job. I used to work at a fast food place that almost nobody ever got fired from. But there was one manager who got fired for drinking on the job, looking at corn in the office instead of making food, and basically being a colossal screw-up. A few weeks later, I got a call from a retail store asking about him. He put us down as a reference after all that. I couldn't disguise my shock and said, "He put this job on his work history?" Then I said he was not eligible for rehire, but I couldn't give any details. They hired him anyway. I heard from someone who worked there that he stole a bunch of crap from them and they fired him within 6 weeks. I didn't feel too bad for them. They should have known better when even the stoner-staffed fast food joint wouldn't give a good reference.
Hey, Surfer Boy Pizza, this is Argyle speaking. We make everything fresh here at Surfer Boy, except for our pineapple, which comes from a can, but I still recommend slapping some juicy pineapple on. Oh, fruit on your pizza is gnarly.
Story 7. I was on the receiving end of one of these. A young woman submitted her resume for an assistant position, and her qualifications were impressive. She listed herself as executive assistant to the CEO of a well-known company in my industry. So I called my friend who worked for a VP at the same company. I wanted to know why she was leaving, since the job at my company was not at all as good as the job she was currently in. After a brief pause, I learned that the applicant had been a receptionist, not an assistant, and she had been sleeping with the CEO. Once the CEO tried to end their situation, the applicant threatened blackmail. She was fired immediately after that. I sent her resume back to HR, and that girl was blackballed from my company and the placement agency that submitted her. Story 8. I had the opportunity to, but I declined. I was worried the guy was going to sue me. He was extremely paranoid when he worked for me. I coached him into doing his job better, but he quit unexpectedly. He left a 13-page Unabomber-style manifesto with both HR and my boss about how terrible I was and how I was an arrogant, narcissistic butthole, and how he was the only person on my team who did any work. 6 months later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail since I was busy. Same number called 7 more times that hour before I finally picked it up to find out what was so freaking urgent. Turned out it was Manifesto Guy asking for a reference. Not touching that one. Told him to contact HR. Wow, some people are really clueless. Got cussed out today because I wouldn't pay for a stranger's groceries. Where do you draw the line with charity?
Story 1. I was at work a while back at a major retailer in the Deep South. I had a gentleman come in and ask me about a laptop. The laptop cost $899. I explained the specs, gave him the lowdown on the warranty, etc. He let me wrap up my spiel and looked at me and said, "I'll give you $400 for it." This happens a lot, so I patiently informed him that this was impossible for me to do and I do not designate prices. He looked at me and said, "Well, you just lost yourself a computer sale," and left. I wish it ended there. I got off and was walking to my car, and as I got there, a truck comes flying into the parking lot, and it's this same gentleman as before. He whips into the parking spot next to mine and gets out. My metaphorical hackles were raised because this guy was driving so aggressively. He gets out and slams his door and walks over to me. He looks at me and says, "You'll sell that laptop to me for $300 or I'm going to get you fired for racism." I answered him and just said, "Sir, I have no idea who you are, and I have no intention of selling you anything at all. I'm not even on the clock. If you have an issue, go into the store and ask for a manager." He swore explosively that his intimidation factor didn't work and went into the store. I drove home and forgot about it. I get to work the next day and find out that he was arrested for trying to steal the shelf display. Feelsgoodman.jpg.
Story 2. In senior year, I was in an English elective where we made t-shirts to sell to the rest of the school. We were supposed to go around and collect money for the shirts before they were ordered, and we'd ask people that we knew if they wanted one. This one girl got really into it and ended up getting about 15 people to pony up the $10 for the shirt. Not many people really tried to sell, to be honest. Then 3 days before the money was due to be collected, someone stole her backpack, which had all the money and names of the people who ordered the shirts. Getting their names was the easy part. The hard part was getting back the $150 to buy the shirts or return to the people. In the end, she was only able to get about $70 to the teacher, who was going to open up her own wallet to pay the remaining $80. Instead, after class, I walked up to the teacher and handed her a $100 bill. I asked for her not to tell anyone. Naturally, the next day she told everyone, but at least left my name out. I ended up getting $60 back because the teacher insisted on paying half of the remainder herself. It was the most charitable thing I've done to date, and I still remember the look on the girl's face when she heard that someone offered to donate the remainder for her. Story 3. When I was living in France a few years ago, my roommate and I went to the grocery store to buy food. The budget was tight, so we ended up going to one of those really cheap supermarkets, the kind of place where they don't even have shelves, just pallets on the floor. We leave the store with the shopping cart, and then this small group of gypsy women immediately pounce on us, begging for food for their hungry kids, blah, blah, blah. We decided to give them the benefit of the doubt and offer them a few things out of our cart. They take it, but then start grabbing at other crap as well, just freaking helping themselves. I literally had to start slapping hands, like a mom guarding her cookie dough, if you can imagine your mom guarding cookie dough from a bunch of gypsies. Anyways, after a lot of screaming and yelling in my less than fluent French, they wander off with the few things we gave them and pop the trunk of their mid-2000s Mercedes parked a few feet away and shove the food in there amidst a pile of food that they already had. Like the trunk was packed. They then proceeded to gang up on the next people to come out of the supermarket. This was early in my stay in France, before I learned that gypsies really suck.
Depending on which parts of France you visit, or Europe in general, there seemed to be a heavy concentration of people trying to scam tourists like this. Of course, you've got your standard pickpocketers in Paris, and those annoying street vendors that are just shoving flowers in your face trying to sell them to you while you're just trying to eat your meal at a restaurant. But there's also people like this OP described that really try to play it up that they're in need, when really this is their full-time hustle. France!
Story 4. I was getting a prescription one night from Walgreens. I work late, and this was a 24-hour one, so I usually bustle inside around midnight after work and try not to talk to the people hanging around outside. An old skinny guy was sitting on the sidewalk, homeless, and on my way out, he calls to me and says he's hungry. So hungry, he just wanted to eat. But the only thing open was McDonald's and just the drive-thru. He didn't have a car. I don't know why, but I asked him what he wanted, and he said a Big Mac with no lettuce and a Coke with no ice. I told him I'd get it for him. Surprisingly, he tried to hand me a ton of change for my trouble, which I refused. I wasn't going to give him a ride, I just went and got it and came back, since Mickey D's was right across the road. When I came back and handed him a bag of food, having gotten a few bottles of water for him too, he didn't say, "God bless you," or anything I feel homeless people usually try to say. He just said, "I didn't think you would come back," and he had tears in his eyes. Then he wished me a good night and sat down to eat. No regrets. Story 5. When I worked up in northern British Columbia, there was a lady I was constantly helping out because of severe domestic violence issues. Anywho, a few years pass and I successfully get the guy on the conditions to not enter the province, and I get called to her house because he phoned her up, which was a breach of his conditions. She starts crying because he refused to give her the money he owes her, and she has to choose between food and rent, and that she felt like she might have to go back with him for the money and recant on the stand. This is common in cases of domestic abuse, and she was so injured from his last attack that she couldn't work, and she was in a 12-step program for alcoholism. Knowing her as well as I did, I took her statement, gave her a hug, and left. Right after my shift was done, I went to Save On Foods, got her groceries, and delivered them to her house. We did a puzzle until she stopped crying. She successfully testified against him and gave a statement about an aggravated assault in which he almost ended her life a month later. Story 6. I was checking out of a Walgreens, and a man with a lot of what looked like skin cancer approached the register. He asked the manager if he was a veteran. The manager was, so he asked to speak privately with him. I couldn't hear much, but he was asking for money. Manager turns him down as I'm walking out of the store. Man tracks me down on my way to the car and gives me a sob story about being a war veteran with skin cancer and he needs money to get to the VA. I asked him for proof that he was a veteran. He didn't have any, of course, so I said I could not help him. After pressing me for money aggressively, He started cursing at me, rolled his eyes, and walked away. I posted this a while ago, and an actual veteran advised me that they carry some special form on them at all times. He said it's more important than a birth certificate to them. I can't believe a guy has the audacity to witch me out when he's the one impersonating a veteran for money. Story 7. A while back, after I lost my job, I was starving and went to the grocery store for just a few cheap things to last me a couple of days. At the register, my card got denied. I apologized to the cashier and tried not to seem upset because I could have sworn I had a few dollars in the bank. The woman in line behind me told me to grab the food and that she'd pay for it. I thanked her, and she replied, "You look like someone who would do the same if you could, and I hope that one day you will." Amazed by her kindness and how good it made me feel for a stranger to help me out while I was at my lowest, I promised myself I'd do the same. Once I got a new job, I was leaving work one day, and an older man in a wheelchair asked if I had any money for food. We were outside a sandwich shop, and I offered to go in and buy him whatever he'd like to eat. He told me to frick off and rolled away into the night. Story 8. I remember about 10 years ago, I had just moved to a new city for college, and I was definitely a starving student. I had a budget of $40 a week for food and transportation, and that was it. Anyway, one evening I'm walking from class to the bus stop, and I see a kid sitting in an alcove begging passersby for money. A few things: he had a nice bike, new shoes, I had neither, and expensive sunglasses. So he sees me and asks if I have some spare change. Feeling charitable, I reach into my wallet and I see that I have $22, 2 singles and a 20. I take out the 2 singles and pass them to him, and he says, "Oh, you aren't giving me the 20? At which point I took the 2 singles back, stuck them in my wallet, pocketed it, and walked off, while this moochy butthole says something akin to, "Come on, that's not cool. Can I please have the $2? Beggars can't be choosers has never felt more appropriate. Story 9. I was eating some bagels, or bagels for all you miscreants, with a few of my friends when a homeless man approached and asked for money to buy food. We had a bag of day-olds that my friend bought, so we offered him his choice of those bagels. He looked at the bagels and said, "I don't want your freaking bagels, I want cash." We told him we didn't have any cash on us, but would be more than happy to share the food we had with him. He just stared at me for a few seconds, and then started yelling profanities at me for not giving him money. I just told him that beggars can't be choosers, and that if he's not going to accept what we offer him, then he has no right to be upset about anything. Then the rest of the people eating on the patio took my side and basically told him to get out of there, because none of them were going to give him a dime after that outburst. What golden nugget of information do you have to share? Story 1. The gray rock treatment is an incredibly useful method of dealing with narcissists and toxic people. If such a person is going at you verbally or behaviorally, screaming or posturing or trying to fight, become like a gray rock in a river. No reaction, don't answer, no movement, just sit calmly and let the stream of crazy flow past you. Bonus points if you can stare blankly. When people thrive on causing a reaction, they absolutely cannot compute when they get no reaction. If you're in physical danger, obviously react to keep yourself safe, but don't argue, explain, or defend verbally. You'll never change a narcissist's mind. It's just walking on a treadmill. Obviously not foolproof. Keep yourself safe first and foremost. I once did this with a narcissist ex, just sat blankly. After they calmed down, they sat facing a different direction. My nose was runny due to allergies, so I got the sniffles. Sniffle, sniffle again. My ex turned around with this strange smile on their face. They thought I was crying. When they realized I was perfectly composed, they became bewildered. The most awful smile on their face for that one moment. Your ex smiled because they thought they actually hurt you and made you cry? What the frick? I don't know how such horrible people exist. I accidentally discovered this a couple of days ago. I work in healthcare, and for the past several weeks, we've had an increasing number of people frustrated with the pandemic, complaining about wearing a mask, being allowed to go some places but not others, etc. I had tried to explain flattening the curve, keeping numbers in the ICU manageable, using logic and science to explain the why behind the stay-at-home orders. I convinced exactly 0 people and only aggravated myself. Yesterday, I was just tired, so when patients came in complaining about the situation, I just didn't say anything and let them vent their spleen. Eventually, they stopped talking and changed the subject on their own. Story 2. Airline ops guy here. If you check in a bag at an airport with an hour or less before departure, it has a 50-50 shot of making it on the plane. Just like the TSA line, bag security can back up too. I regularly see over 30 minutes in screening statuses on bags. Then it may be pulled for a hand screening and search. This is random and TSA doesn't care when the flight leaves. So now we are at about 25 minutes to departure and your bag has only just now entered the sort system. It will take another 5 to 10 minutes to sort out to the person who loads carts with bags. Here, the problem is that there may be 7 to 10 other flights coming off of the same conveyor belts. They have to see your bag's tag out of maybe 50 other bags, so let's assume another 5 minutes. Your flight's bag cart was delivered plainside at an hour before departure. It is now 15 minutes to departure. The bag room has seen your bag and has it on the back of a tug racing to the plane. 7 minutes before departure, the baggage compartments are closed and total weights are being submitted. Your bag has missed the airplane. Too long didn't read? Please check in more than an hour before your flight if checking a bag, or else it might not make it on the plane. So I should check in late, so my bag might be delayed, and I can claim on my insurance $200 for new clothes? Actually, yes. I checked in late for a flight last year and my bag didn't make the plane. I had to buy new clothes and was reimbursed by the airline. Got a cute new swimsuit. I don't recommend this, though. It took days for my bag to find its way to me and made the start of a vacation quite stressful. Use that last life pro tip at your own risk. A family member of mine had their luggage delayed on their way to Europe for their honeymoon. A really horrible start to what should have otherwise been one of the best times of their lives. They took it in good spirits, though, best they could, and bought new clothes to hold them over. But then when their luggage finally arrived, now they had too many items to fit in their suitcase for the trip home and were forced to abandon a good portion of their stuff. Story 3. Each one of the Yamato-class battleship's main gun turrets weighed over 3,000 tons, heavier than the average U.S. destroyer. If you were on a destroyer in the U.S. Navy during World War II, you ran the risk of having to fight a ship whose primary weapons alone displaced more weight than your entire vessel. And the reason for this is that the Japanese Navy had heavy restrictions from the West on how big their navy could be before the start of World War II. So to compensate for this, they built the biggest battleships the world had ever seen. Yep, Washington Naval Treaty, and they were absolutely useless once aircraft carriers became the most effective and valued ships in a fleet. Not to mention they couldn't recoup their losses anywhere near as fast as the US, so every loss really hurt them, and they didn't have the resources to actually get the most out of them. Granted, Japan's carrier force was formidable up until Midway happened, but Japan essentially made a perfect sword while everyone else was making guns with the Yamato. I recall hearing that the Japanese Navy were extremely protective of the Yamato due to its status, and weren't keen on putting it in harm's way. Even then, as impressive as its numbers are, it was an outdated concept in an era where naval combat was dominated by air superiority and submarine warfare. It was just a very expensive dong measuring exercise. Story 4. If you see a job you really want but aren't quite qualified for it, apply anyway. Don't tell yourself no. Make them tell you no. You might be pleasantly surprised. Both my son and daughter followed this advice and got a job that turned into a career. As a manager who hires people, yes, apply for everything you're reasonably competent for, even if you can't check all the boxes. Most of what I look for is experience and practical application of knowledge, skills, and tools. Even so, I am aware that many aspects can be taught easily and quickly. We are also looking for general intelligence and character, good mindset, and work ethic. I manage the engineering department at my company. Even people applying for design, manufacturing, quality control, or whatever we happen to be looking for generally are not applying with the specific degree. There's a ton of overlap. Heck, what I even went to school for, I've barely used. Not have really been hired on specially for. Story 5. I had a heart transplant 5 years ago. When your heart is replaced, the surgeon has to cut the main nerve that gets the signal from the brain to beat, or increase the intensity of the beat. Without this vagus nerve, your new heart has no regulation and pumps blood out of habit. You no longer have a fight or flight response, and your new heart beats at 90 plus beats a minute. The vagus nerve slows the heart. Epinephrine in your bloodstream, released from your adrenal glands, in a fight or flight situation can still speed it up though. Also, congratulations on your new heart. I hope you have a great life. That is terrifying. So if you get nervous, your heart doesn't race? Right, I have no internal regulation over my heart rate. My new heart beats purely from muscle memory. I can't think about it for too long because it's just too freaky. Story 6. Horses have a massive blind spot on the front and back of their body. If you're ever around a tame horse, keep a hand on their body while walking around them. This lets it know where you are at all times, and decreases chances of kicking out of shock or fear. This also prevents them from kicking you with as much force. You need to stay very close to them for the full benefit. This is similar with goats, as they instinctively fight things coming head-on and should be approached from the sides. Also, ears are the gateway to a horse's feelings. Pinned back ears indicates an anxious or angered horse. Pinned straight up indicates curiosity and focus. Story 7. Don't buy French bulldogs. They're a fad breed that was sick to begin with, and so many people are being scammed by backyard breeders and puppy farms. They're depressingly broken. If you do buy one, even from an official breeder, be prepared for allergies, ocular bleeding from eye pressure, hip dysplasia, cherry eye, trachea collapse, twisted spine, and dreadful breathing problems. They are expensive. Too many teen girls buy them and can't afford the allergy meds and food, and just leave them to suffer. One visited the clinic last week, collapsed, and passed away because of an extra long walk in the sunshines. Don't do it. Let this breed disappear and buy a dog with a nose, please. Story 8. When choking on food and can't get help, you can get into a push-up position and then just drop down. The ground hitting your stomach and chest will cause what you're choking on to dislodge. There's a video I saw of a guy doing this move, and then, completely serious, he said, "If you're pregnant, you cannot do this." And I bursted out laughing. Now I will always remember how to save myself if I'm choking. Story 9. I work front desk at a hotel. I've seen this before, so I hope it's new to someone. Don't use sites like Expedia, etc. If you book directly with the hotel, you can always call to make changes. If you need to cancel, you can avoid the 24-hour window fee by changing your reservation to a few days later. Then call back the next day to cancel. Third-party booking sites are not easy to change info. We cannot change the rate if something needs to be fixed, and you're looked down upon and get whatever basic rooms are available. Not by me personally, but everyone around me. Story 10. If you don't have a toilet plunger and you've clogged it up, pour in a bit of dish soap and some hot water. The hotter the better. Let stand for 15 minutes and flush. Learned this when immediately upon arriving at our hotel, my 8-year-old clogged up our toilet, and I Googled. Found this gem, realized I'd packed a tiny travel bottle of dish soap, warmed water up in the microwave, and lo and behold, it worked. I still use it sometimes at home when I don't want to be grossed out by plunging. Yes, my child has a tendency to clog toilets. So there you go. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.